It's time to get down and dirty. Let's talk about soil. What's up, fellow plant enthusiasts? My name is Dylan Bain and this is Bain's Botanicals. Today we're going to be talking about soil. This is a direct continuation of my video on water, so if you haven't watched that yet, please go back and watch it. There's a lot of good information there and some of this ties into that. So first of all, what is soil? Usually if you buy a bag of soil, it'll tell you on the back what's in it. The particular soil that I use has sphagnum peat moss, fertilizer, perlite, coir, and a wetting agent. So to explain what some of those things are, coir, I think that's how you pronounce it. Anyway, it's just like the husks of coconuts. Like if you touch soil, you'll notice it's kind of stringy. That's from the coconut. We know what fertilizer is. A lot of the fertilizer in soil is time release. So if you just repot a plant, you probably don't need a fertilizer right away just because it's already going to have some fertilizer in the new soil. What else did I say? Sphagnum peat moss. I've heard different things about this. I've heard that peat moss is not very sustainable because it forms in bogs and it takes a really long time to make. There are alternatives to it, so please do some research if that's something that concerns you and you want to be more informed about it. But I have heard that, you know, as a whole, we need to be getting away from using peat moss. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that, or if somebody can expand on that, please do. The wetting agent, of course, is to help retain water. Perlite, of course, is for drainage. And what perlite is, it's basically volcanic glass that has been superheated to really extreme temperatures until it pops, kind of like popcorn. And it's light and it's kind of flaky and it just adds that extra drainage. Some other things that you might see, if you have like a cacti succulent mix, you're probably gonna see more sand in it and you'll probably see more perlite as well. In the moisture retention soils, you might actually have vermiculite, or is it vermiculite? I've always said vermiculite, but it could be vermiculite because it's spelled, the end is the same as perlite. Anyway, vermiculite is very similar to perlite in that they're both kind of from a volcanic underground origin, but the difference is that vermiculite actually retains moisture. So if you're wanting something that needs to stay a little wetter, you could add some vermiculite. And if you want to have extra drainage, then you add perlite. I've never saw the need to use vermiculite, but I imagine if you were planting something outside or if you were like doing some gardening with flowers, especially in a drier area, I could see the benefit of having vermiculite in your mix. Anyway, what else am I talking about? Oh yeah. So along with soil, we have to talk about roots. Now, there are different types of roots in plants. Eventually, I'll do a plant anatomy video and we'll kind of talk more in detail. But for the purposes of house plants, you really only have like standard roots, and then you have rhizomes, which all a rhizome is, it's kind of a horizontal root that you'll see a lot in ferns. You'll see it in other things. Like I think the strawberry begonia is a rhizome too. I could be wrong about that. But the one I know it most for is ferns. And you notice when a fern grows, like think about a rabbit's foot fern and the feet that come out of the pot, you'll notice that there is new growth that kind of shoots up along these roots that are actually rhizomes. You also have like bulbs. So think about a ZZ plant. If you've ever replanted a ZZ Zamioculcas plant, they have just these little they're not tubers, that's potatoes. I just call them bulbs. There's definitely a difference between bulb and tuber, and there's another one, but anyway. Those are just kind of used for storage, like storage of water, storage of nutrients. But yes, outside, you might notice like trees have tap roots. That's when there's a main central root that goes all the way down, usually to the water table. And then something like grass will have fibrous roots. And fibrous roots are really short little things, and they're just really good for absorbing water quickly. So think about like when it rains, the grass can absorb the water quickly. It doesn't have to go all the way down like a tree does with a taproot. What else about roots? Cacti and succulents, but especially cacti, tend to have shallower roots. If you've ever repotted a cactus, you'll notice that their root systems are not that strong, and it's that same concept of they need to absorb water quickly in the desert. So they don't have a need to have a big taproot because, I mean, it just doesn't rain enough. So they just absorb as much water as they can, as quickly as they can, and there you go. That's all I got about roots for now. So let's talk about wet soil and dry soil, because this kind of ties into watering. So like I have this little saucer of soil, and it's pretty dry. This is kind of fresh out of the bag, but I've let it sit for a day or two just so that it can get dry. You notice that it's pretty light brown in color. It's when I pick it up, see how much dust there is? That's usually a good indicator that your soil's really dry. I just made a huge mess. That's okay. So then I've got this saucer, same soil, same bag, and I just gave this one a little bit of water. I also sprayed it with a little water, just misted it. And you notice when I touch it, it's very spongy, and it keeps its form. Like I don't want to, it's not Dairy Queen. I don't want to like do the blizzard thing. It keeps its form, it's wet to the touch, it sticks to my finger a little bit. That's a sign that your plant is not in need of water. Like this soil is plenty moist, this does not need water. But when you start to get to this one where it starts to flake, and you can see I can just tap it and it starts to move, this needs water. Now if it's like a cactus or a succulent, they can stay like this for a little bit. Cacti especially. Cacti can stay like this for days. Succulents, I wouldn't let them sit too long like this, but definitely let them get to this point. Okay, because I know I get a lot of questions, or I have gotten a lot of questions from people in person that have asked me, well, I just don't know when to water and it's hard to tell. And a lot of people do the finger method, where you just stick like basically the last joint of your finger into the soil and you just see if it's wet underneath. Like if you touch and you hit this kind of spongy wet feeling and you pull your finger out and it's got dirt on it, it's probably fine. But if you stick your finger in there and it's dry, then it's time to water. You can get moisture meters, those work too. I've never used one just because, I don't know, maybe I'm old-fashioned, I guess, but that's definitely an option if you're nervous about how much or how little you're watering. What else do I have written down here to say? Oh, okay, so when your soil, let's say you have a plant and you've let it dry out too much. Like the soil is super dry, it's really dusty, and you need to water it. You'll notice that when you water it, that water runs straight through. You really need to probably re-moisturize your plant, aside from if it's like a cactus or something, like this. So, excuse me, my goodness. So I've got this Madagascar jasmine. This is Stephanotis. I don't remember the species, but it's Stephanotis. Really pretty. It had blooms on it in the spring, and it has not bloomed since because I think they only bloom a couple times a year. But it's put out a lot of new growth, and it's on this nice little hoop here. Nice big textural, leaves that are very succulent-like, but they're not. I've just noticed when I touch this, you can see that, like it's really solid, but it's not wet. Like I can pull this. I could probably pull this right out of the pot actually. And I mean, you can see there's a little moisture in there, but for the most part, this is pretty dry. Okay, this is dripping everywhere. That's fine. Something that gets really dry like this, it's hard to just water it and expect it to be okay. I would actually soak this, like either just continue letting water run over it, or I've actually gotten to the point, if it's not too big of a plant, I'll actually sit it in like a tub of water just for maybe a minute, just to let all of that water get soaked into the root ball. Because I think one of the mistakes that some people make is when they water, they either don't water enough to where the water runs out, or if it's really dry, they give it a drink, but not a big enough drink to soak that root ball. Because what happens is when the root ball of the plant doesn't get moisture, those roots dry out eventually, they desiccate, so they just kind of turn to dust, and of course, your plant needs roots to survive. But yes. What else? I know I have more, you guys. Oh, okay. The other thing involving soil and water both is that when it's wintertime, this might be common knowledge, but I feel like it bears repeating. You're not going to water as much in the wintertime because there's not as much light, and your plants, most of them, will go through a dormant phase where they don't undergo as much photosynthesis because there's less light, because the days are shorter, the light is less intense, the temperatures drop, maybe not so much in our homes because of course we have heaters, but they still feel kind of that ambient temperature drop. If they're not undergoing as much photosynthesis, then they don't need as much water. So especially something like a cacti definitely go through a dormant period where they, like during the wintertime, I'll water my cactus maybe once a month, maybe. And I know that sounds crazy, it can seem kind of scary, like neglecting your plant that much, but if they're not using the water, it's just going to sit there, and especially with cacti and succulents, that's going to cause root rot if you water them as much as you do in the summer. In the summer, it's great because there's lots of light, they're growing left and right, they're really needing that water to make that energy for themselves. Hopefully that makes sense. So just when it's wintertime, water less. The exceptions to that rule would be like ferns. I think ferns don't really go dormant, and you still want to make sure that they stay moist. You still don't want a fern to dry out. Another exception might be some of your robust trailing plants, like Philodendron heteroecium, like the heartleaf, which is like right there, and any of the epiprimnum, so any of the pothos. There's one, there's several, but they don't really go through a dormant phase, and they actually keep growing through most of the winter. So you might find that you still water them almost the same amount. The only difference is that I don't know if I have an example. Maybe I can reach this. So this is actually a Monstera, well, it's a Monstera Peru. I can't think of what the species is because it's weird. But the space between the nodes, the node is where the leaf comes out. The space between the node is called the internode. And you'll notice in the wintertime, why doesn't this have more leaves on it? You'll notice in the wintertime that because of the lack of light, that the inner node will be bigger. Like you're going to have more space between the leaves. And that's normal. You can just prune that off when it comes around to spring. And that way you can have you can have trailing vines that are fuller, I guess. But still, they still grow. That one, I don't know what it's doing, but Monstera is a little bit different. What else? I'm trying not to overwhelm and say too many things at once. So that might actually be all I have about soil. We'll talk about fertilizer in a different video. I don't want to get into that now. But yeah, soil's really interesting. You'll notice that you might find the occasional bug in your soil. Like it's not a big deal unless it's one of the parasites that you don't want. But I mean, I found a millipede in my soil the other day, just a little baby one. And millipedes are harmless. They're cute. I mean, if an insect like that can be cute, I guess. But yeah, I've also seen soil mixes with lava rock, like the red chunks of lava rock. That might be, I forget which one has that. I think there's a tropical mix that it helps with drainage. But yeah, if you guys have any questions on soil, let me know. If you have anything that you'd like to add that people should know that I've missed, please comment, let me know. You guys have added some really cool things to like the videos, and I try to highlight that because, hey, there's just sometimes I miss information. I try to take notes before I make these videos, so I'm like, I want to make sure I hit everything. But yeah, So I think that's all I have about soil and water and light. This little trilogy of videos should hopefully be helpful for you guys. And yes, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for following. Thank you for liking. And thank you for commenting. Like, I wake up every day and I'm like, oh, more comments. That's awesome. I just love interacting with you guys. So yes, until the next video, I will talk to you guys soon, and thank you.